your guide to the truth. TheNewAmericanMedia.com.
Broadcasting to you live from the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, planet Earth, North America, the United States of America, Los Angeles, California, specifically. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this crazy world that we live in. It's all happening, isn't it? Our southern border is a mess right now. The Gaza Strip, Israel, Palestine, Jews, Palestinians fighting. Commercial airlines are being shot out of the freaking sky in Ukraine. It's all good though. It's all good though. Remember, collectively we decided we were going to put a commander-in-chief in charge that can deal with all of this complicated stuff happening in this world. We have a commander-in-chief. We've chosen the chosen one to be commander-in-chief. So we're good, right? We have a really competent, capable person there, right? Right? Right. My name's Brian Engelman. You're listening to Agree to Disagree here on the NewAmericanMedia.com, part of the TNAM radio network. And I gotta say, there is a lot going on. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to split this show up into a couple different pieces. I'm bringing in an author. I'm bringing in a pastor. I'm bringing in a very interesting person. He is related to me by blood. This is my uncle. And I want to talk about this stuff because very few people can articulate modern, and by modern I mean the past 50 years of geopolitical issues. He really condenses them in ways you can understand. And of course he's a sports fan, was a sportscaster, and it was a big week for LeBron, and I just want to start with something just to kind of decompress and then get into, you know, a war, and then another war, and then another war, and planes getting shot down. I want to start with something light, but I'm going to split them up into 3 different segments. We're definitely going to talk about Russia, Ukraine. We got to talk about the southern border, too. Bruce is down there in Texas, and we have to cover this stuff. It's just not getting covered the right way. It's not getting covered enough. We got to keep pushing on this. So thank you for joining us, and if you are new to the show, or if you just have been too, if you haven't gotten around to it yet, can you do us a favor and check out the rest of the places we put our information? Our homepage is called TheNewAmericanMedia.com, and on the bottom right of there, there's the Facebook and Twitter links where you can just click and you can like our page and follow us. On Twitter, you can do it on the side. It's at American_media_, at American_media_. Follow us on Twitter. On Facebook, you can do a search for The New American Media with spaces in between and like the page. YouTube channel is really taking off. I don't know, 335,000 video views. Nothing viral, but we're still just warming up 3 years in here. Check that out. Give us a subscription over there so you get notified when the new shows come up. It's youtube.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. So I'm bringing Bruce in because he's written a book on the Kennedy assassination. He has been active in his church, and when you're in a church, you're working with the community. And right now, Texas with this border, I'm telling you, there's the compassion angle, but then there's the common sense angle. You got to stop the water if you want to clean out the water damage from the flood, but it's still flooding. So we're going to bring him in, and I hope you guys enjoy this because I always like these chats.
Hello.
Bruce, you are live on the air, sir. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Brian. How's everything in sunny Southern California?
We're in a bit of a drought, my friend. In a bit of a drought.
we've had rain here, so we much needed rain.
Well, you know, the president is directing governmental agencies to take illegal aliens and ship them across the country, usually not informing the local governor, local mayor, the residents of the community, where people that may have scabies, may have tuberculosis, may have a whole wide swath of health issues being spread into a community. Maybe the president will direct some resources to bring some of that water over to us in California. You think that's possible?
I wouldn't hold my breath, Brian. It's a very good idea, but yes, they're bringing all kinds of things over here, to say the least. And I just wanted to say parenthetically, from the outset of this interview, that as your uncle, I'm very, very proud of you and what you're doing in the media, and your show is rising to the top, and I'm very, very proud of you.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you. You know, all we know how to do is what we know how to do today, and seldom do we have every answer to every problem in the world. You know, come up with a question, right, and then 12 hours later I have the answer. It's rare that happens, and it's rare that ideas and messages can get out there. But I mean, in the age of information, it's our obligation to put our product out there, to put rational thought and constructive criticism and trying to shed light on important issues. I just, you know, you're a theologian. You're a man who's been in charge of congregations pretty much most of your adult life, and I want you to kind of walk us through, you know, where you came from, so the audience can kind of get caught up to speed before we really dig into these, kind of knowing your background a little bit, because I'd rather have you say it correctly than me butcher it. But I just think, Bruce, that at some point I'm going to have to meet my maker, and however that plays out, every religion has a theory, however that plays out, I just want to at least be able to say that I tried. And I might not have the answers, I might not have the budget, I might not have the team, I might not have the resources, all that stuff, but I have a motivation to try to pay it forward, because I think this country's kind of cool, and it could be a lot better if we could sort this out, but it seems to be, you know, kind of being pulled and ripping apart at the seams right now. So, anyway, thank you for the kind words. I've never understood how to take a compliment. I just ramble, or I don't say thank you. So, anyway, let's get to the show, because, you know, I briefly gave the introduction, and I would do you a huge disservice without having your full bio in front of me right now. Kind of introduce yourself to the crowd and kind of who you are, where you're coming from, because I definitely want to cover the LeBron back to Cleveland story. There's our lighthearted thing, but it's also bigger than that. But you have a unique perspective in sports, media, politics, spirituality, like all this stuff. So let it rip. I want to stop talking now. I want to listen.
Well, thank you, Brian, for your compliments, and I'll just let your listeners know that I am the senior pastor and minister of Triumph Baptist Church in Fort Worth, Texas, part of the huge Metroplex, one of the fastest growing regions in the United States. I've been here 7.5 years. Our church is an inner city church. We reach out to the gangs, reach out to the impoverished, reach out to the homeless, and we also have a small Bible college and seminary, Southland Baptist College, affiliated with our church, where we train and educate ministers and preachers and missionaries. And prior to that, I was in evangelism in Florida for 3 years. Then I pastored in Houston Baptist Church in Kingwood, Texas for a short while. And then I was on staff prior to that at a Bible college in East Texas as director of recruitment and staff evangelist. And then prior to that, I pastored in the Columbus, Ohio area for 10 years. And prior to that, I was in seminary in Chicago. And back yonder, even farther than that, I was in the media myself for 8 years, as you well know. I worked for ABC TV and CBS TV, and as well as a newspaper reporter for the largest paper in Pennsylvania, the Tribune Review, Pittsburgh Tribune Review. And also along the way worked for about 8 different radio stations. I was anchoring the sports on our local TV station in Indiana, PA, Jimmy Stewart's hometown, when I was 18. And so, yes, many years in the media, about 8, 9 years in the media, and we also have a syndicated talk show right now. It is a sports program called Sports with Bruce Engelman that's heard around the country on a half a dozen stations in about 20 states. And so, yes, I do believe that the old adage, you know, they used to tell us, Brian, at the family reunions, before you go, don't ever talk religion and politics. Well, I never believe that. I still don't believe that. That's all I talk about.
That's all I talk about, too. Absolutely. Every time. You can't take me anywhere. That is my favorite. That's all I'm interested in. Well, okay, sports is a little soap opera, but always talk religion and politics, because that's the important stuff.
Yeah, it is. And if we're not willing to take a stand on the important stuff, then why socialize to begin with? And we are fighting for our country right now. We are literally fighting for our nation and our very survival, and I'm not overstating the case. And so kudos and props to you for being outspoken about your heartfelt beliefs and your core values. It is not time to be a closet patriot. It's not a time to be a closet Christian. It's not a time to be a closet citizen. We need to be out front with traditional values and morals and constitutional politics. And I appreciate your stand in the past for Ron Paul, and I'm endorsing his son for president, by the way. And so I'm excited. I think this is a great opportunity, but I am very concerned, Brian, about the direction of our administration in Washington. I must say this is the absolute worst president I have ever seen in my entire lifetime, and the lack of leadership is causing planes to be blown out of the air. It's causing an immigration crisis right here in Texas. It's causing our VA people and vets to die like flies as they await treatment. You know, how can we afford these 144,000 immigrants when we can't even take care of our veterans who fought for this country? And the IRS scandal makes Watergate, Whitewater, and Teapot Dome combined look like a Sunday school picnic. So we have a lot of trouble in Washington, D.C., and our president seems to be content with playing billiards, playing golf, going on vacation again, doing fundraisers, and attending barbecues while literally the nation is in flames, the country's in flames, policemen are being gunned down, Israel is attacking on the West Bank, and Gaza's in flames, and it blows my mind.
It's essentially playing the fiddle while the world burns, isn't it?
Exactly. The old adage that Nero, the emperor of the time, the Caesar of the time, fiddled while Rome literally burned, and that's exactly what we have going on today with all these crises. Somebody said the other day that there are presently 17 major scandals going in and out of Washington, D.C., and what makes me really angry, Brian, more than anything, is unlike you and maybe just a couple of media outlets, my sources have told me, and I used to work for CBS and ABC, my sources have told me that they have been told in their newsrooms of the 4 major networks, NBC, CBS, CNN, and the worst one is ABC, which used to be the most objective, we are not going to cover any negative stories about the president. We are not going to cover the IRS scandal, which again makes Watergate look like a Tinker Toy show. We're not going to cover the veteran scandal, and now the president lets out, as Mike Savage said, with this airplane crash, because it's going to knock off the IRS scandal, the VA scandal, off the air for 3 months as they look for the black box. The media is obsessed, always has been, with plane crashes. And so the media is complicit in this cover-up. And these jokers on ABC and CBS have the audacity to call themselves journalists, and they will never ask Obama a tough question. And if they do accidentally, they never follow up on it, or the other reporter won't follow up on it. But bless God, if this were Reagan or one of the Bushes, they'd be railroading them out of office for one of these scandals.
You know, and I will agree with that. I think the only time you can find a single redeeming quality in the left-wing, bought-and-sold corporate media, the air quote, some people still like to call them mainstream. I'm sticking to dinosaur. I've been saying that for a while. A lot of people are calling them the dinosaur media, and I think we need to put them in their place, because this is a breed that is dying out. And while you might be frustrated that these left-wing corporate-controlled media conglomerates are not providing the truth, the beauty is this. They're just exposing who they are. The only time that media is any worth a damn, Bruce, is when a Republican's in there to hold their feet to the fire. Except they don't hold their feet to the fire. They're taking pot shots and on top of it, rooting for failure on it, which doesn't do journalism any good. But what it is doing is it's showing that, yes, Fox is seeming okay now because they're really calling to light all of the lies, all of the corruption from the Obama administration, but they were damn near silent when George Bush was out there with his policies. I know he's a Texas guy. I know you voted for him. I got duped into voting for him too. But a lot of what we're seeing now is, in a way, a continuation of what we saw under the George W. Bush administration. And it's hard to pick out the good things, the wrong things, the right things, because the general consensus was that Iraq was at least under control. Everything was kind of sorted out. It was still a mess, but it was calming down, and it's gone a complete other direction around the same time that the Muslim Brotherhood started tearing through northern Africa, and it's really spread to Russia. It's spread to, in the Ukraine, and I think, Bruce, back to the media angle of this, I think that it's the best thing that could happen is that we've had 6 years of trying to cover up for an either incompetent or treasonous presidency in our office. Either incompetent or treasonous, or at least unconstitutional and impeachable. They are showing their true colors. They are not being taken seriously anymore as leaders in news. They're looked at as a joke. And I think that's a good thing for all up-and-coming, internet radio shows or internet websites, because we are the new American media, because the old American media won't do their job anymore. So we're stepping up to do the job they won't do. That's how I see it.
You're exactly right, and that's why Mike Savage's show is skyrocketing. They've kicked Mike off the air about 3 or 4 times, and he keeps coming back. And now his internet show surpassed Rush Limbaugh's. Your show is gaining meteoric popularity across the country. And between the alternative media and the internet and blogs and Breitbart and all these other people, they can no longer seal the news. And you're absolutely right. They are dinosaurs. Nobody is watching CBS Nightly News and NBC Nightly News and ABC World News Tonight as they used to. When I was a journalist, we only had basically 3 networks, and everybody tuned in to watch Uncle Walter Cronkite on CBS Nightly News. That's the way it was. The 800th day of captivity for 300 Americans in Iran. I mean, everybody tuned in to listen to Uncle Walter, and the few that didn't checked out Huntley Brinkley on NBC and Peter Jennings and Ted Koppel and Max Robinson and those guys on ABC, Frank Reynolds, and they did their job. They were all liberal Democrats. Oh yes, they were, or they were all ultra liberal independents like Walter Cronkite. But with the exception of maybe Dan Rather, they were objective, and they went after the conservatives as well as they went after the conservatives as well as they went after. For instance, they went after Nixon with Watergate, and who was a Republican, and they went after Mr. Gary Hartpence when he had his scandal with the same what's vengeance or
fervor.
The same, what's that?
Fervor.
Hello, you there?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying a very bizarre word. The same the same tenacity. How about that?
Tenacity. I couldn't. Thank you, Brian. You are a wordsmith. The same tenacity. But today they are all ultra partisan, and they will cover for the Democrats. For instance, the media. Let me give you a good example. And the Dallas media has credited me with this on 2 different talk shows. They said, "Boy, you're right on target, Bruce." Elian Gonzalez. Some people pronounce it Elian. Elian was a 4 or 5-year-old boy whose mother drowned on a raft trying to get him from Cuba to Florida so he could live with his aunt and uncle and his grandmother. and she fell off the raft with a high wave, and a shark came, and bless her heart, it got her, and she drowned, she died. And Elian clung to the raft until a sailor from a private cargo ship jumped overboard, swam, got the kid, swam back to the boat, saved his life, and he went to live with his aunt and uncle and his grandmother and blood relatives in Miami. Oh, but the Clintons, Hillary and Bill and Janet Reno, and all of the liberal media, he's got to go back to his biological dad. Yeah, but his dad beat his mother. Doesn't matter. Biological father, he's got to go back to his daddy. Well, but he's a communist, and he's under the butcher Castro, one of the worst dictators of all time. Doesn't matter. He belongs with his biological daddy. Now, the same media that forced them to send Elian Gonzalez back at gunpoint when they kidnapped him, literally kidnapped him on Easter Eve, the same media, the same Democrats, the same Clintons, the same Janet Reno are saying, oh, these 144,000 kids from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, they don't need to be with their biological parents. Well, good night, Brian. What has changed? I'll tell you what's changed. Politics. And the left is ultra hypocritical. Whatever suits their template at the time, they're for. If the Clintons and Obama are for it, then it's great. But if a Republican, Reagan, Bush, or Nixon are for it, it's bad. And it's time that the media get back to a little bit of objectivity. I don't know how these guys sleep at night, and these women sleep at night, that are White House correspondents for CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, and CBS. I don't know how they sleep at night or shave themselves in the mirror in the morning and have the gall to call themselves a journalist, because they're not. They're nothing but shills. They're nothing but shills for the Democratic Party and the liberal wing of the Democratic Party.
Well, Cheryl Atkinson, James Rosen, there are quite a few journalists that have come under surveillance and scrutiny from the Obama administration already, clearly trying to suppress the First Amendment. That's kind of the game plan. It's the Chicago way. You bring a knife, I bring a gun. You send, one of their people send our guy to the hospital. We send one of their guys to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. And let's not forget, despite the fact that our president wears mom jeans and can't throw a first pitch without looking like he's never held a baseball before, I'm just saying, despite the fact that he might not strike confidence or fear into the heart of Vladimir Putin, and he's not really an imposing character, he still comes from the Chicago way of politics. And this is perhaps, I grew up, I'm too young to remember the Nixon impeachment, but when I hear about Nixon's enemies list, and I actually watch the IRS targeting people of a different political party, and when I see journalists trying to be silenced, not even to mention Michael Hastings' suspicious death out here in Los Angeles last year, or Andrew Breitbart's suspicious death either. I'm just talking about Cheryl Atkinson, James Rosen at Fox. I'm talking about the intimidation techniques there. This is the Chicago way, and they're trying to bully their way into their agenda. And this brings me directly to the border, Bruce, because down here at the border, we know that this administration has known about this problem for a long time, and a lot of people are saying they just view them as undocumented Democrats. So let's flood the country to change the dynamic of the voting bloc in 2 decades, and the Republicans or anybody that values the Constitution, and by the way, a lot of Republicans don't value the Constitution, which is why I've de-affiliated from the Republican Party myself. I don't trust them any more than I trust the Democrats. It's all about the Constitution. Keep it that way for me. But this has been part of the problem that they've wanted. The Cloward and Piven strategy that Barack Obama was taught growing up, Saul Alinsky, you got to overwhelm the system. It's the Cloward and Piven tactic. Overwhelm the system. Overwhelm the federal government handouts so there are more people taking than producing, collapse the system in on itself economically. Here we are with $17 trillion on our credit card debt. No president's ever spent more. And people are legitimately wondering out loud, is our head coach playing for the other team? And that is insane that we are having this conversation in 2014, Bruce. Have you ever seen anything like this?
I have not. I was a Democrat. I campaigned for Jimmy Carter not once but twice, and I loved the man. I think he was a good Christian man and a good guy, but he was a very weak president. I must be honest about it. And he was the last Democrat I ever voted for president. But I'm going to be honest with you. He's making Jimmy Carter look good and effective. He's making Richard Nixon look honest, and you're right. Nixon's enemy list is nothing compared to the way Obama's going after conservatives and Tea Partiers and having them audited and so forth. And this woman that's pleading the Fifth Amendment for the IRS, she should be in prison right now. And I have never seen anything like this. I honestly, Democrat or Republican, he is by far the worst president we have ever had, Democrat or Republican. And I predicted this because that guy had zero experience. He had never been a U.S. congressman. He had never been a mayor, never been a governor, never been in the military, never run a business. He was a community activist, and you're right, Brian, out of Saul Lewinsky's playbook and the harsh politics in Chicago. I ran a campaign in Chicago one time for a mayoral candidate of a Chicago suburb. Trust me, I know Chicago politics firsthand. But on the flip side of the coin, he is also the most radical, the most unconstitutional, the most ultra-liberal, and the most, I'm going to say it, did I say anti-American president that we've ever had. So you really don't know, is he in over his head and he's totally inept and incompetent? I think he is, because he had zero experience. This is kind of a big office. It's kind of a big job, you know. But on the other hand, he is so radical and so pro-Islamic and so anti-Israel and so against bipartisanship in Congress. He's still blaming Bush for everything, and the guy's been in there for 7 years. What's he doing? Putin is playing him like a fiddle. I mean, if this were a chess game, Brian, Obama's down to like 2 pawns and maybe a knight, and Putin still has all of his chess pieces on that board. He is laughing in his beer at this guy. Well, hey, look at Reagan leaves his vacation that he just started at Rancho Cielo and comes back to the White House when the Ruskies shoot out KAL, the South Korean jetliner, which, by the way, had a strong anti-communist Democrat congressman on that. That was an assassination hit. But be that as it may, McDonald, back when the Democrats were more conservative than the Republicans, hello, Reagan drops what he's doing, ends his vacation, comes back to the White House, meets with his advisors, spends the whole day, the next day, Brian, working on a speech which he presents to the American public that night and exposes the lies of the Russians and the Soviets that, yes, they did down this aircraft. But what's Obama doing? He's playing pool during the immigration crisis for a photo op. He is attending fundraisers and barbecues yesterday and calls it maybe a little tragedy? What is this? This is ludicrous. This guy is a joke. Brian, he's inept, he's incompetent, but he's also a joke. He doesn't care that he's taking America down the sewer. He doesn't care that we're losing ground. He draws lines in the sand. Crimea. You better not invade Crimea. So Putin invades Crimea. What does he do? Nothing. Now he's invading Ukraine. What's Obama doing? Nothing. He draws a line in the sand with Syria. Says you better not cross this line. If you use gas, I'm coming in. Did he come in? No, he didn't. Did he do anything in Egypt? No. And here the Egyptian government is actually standing up to the Muslim Brotherhood. Obama's word means nothing. He is the laughing stock of the world, and his goal is to take this country from the leading superpower and the policeman of the world, which I believe we should be. I agree with Rand Paul and Ron Paul that we stick our nose in too many civil wars. But for the most part, who are they going to turn to? They're not going to turn to Europe. France isn't going to do anything. And so Obama is the laughing stock of the world. And you got to believe, Brian, his goal is to take us from #1 down to #8, and I reject that. I want to remain #1. I want the United States to be the superpower that President Kennedy said, we will help every friend against every foe. You know, we'll be there for you, Kennedy said. This guy, he's a sellout. He's a sellout.
Well, don't forget, Barack Obama said, I'll have a little bit more flexibility after my last election. That was his words. Those were Barack Obama's words to Vladimir Putin. Flexibility on what? And look what's going on with Russia, and look at our milquetoast response. I just want to play a couple seconds here from Ronald Reagan's address to the nation on the Soviet attack of a Korean airliner.
Senator Henry Jackson, a wise and revered statesman and one who probably understood the Soviets as well as any American in history, warned us, the greatest threat the United States now faces is posed by the Soviet Union. But Senator Jackson said, if America maintains a strong deterrent, and only if it does, this nation will continue to be a leader in the crucial quest for enduring peace among nations. The late senator made those statements in July on the Senate floor, speaking in behalf of the MX missile program he considered vital to restore America's strategic parity with the Soviets. When John F. Kennedy was president, defense spending as a share of the federal budget was 70% greater than it is today. Since then, the Soviet Union has carried on the most massive military buildup the world has ever seen. Until they're willing to join the rest of the world community, we must maintain the strength to deter their aggression. But while we do so, we must not give up our effort to bring them into the world community of nations. Peace through strength, as long as necessary, but never giving up our effort to bring peace closer through mutual, verifiable reduction in the weapons of war. I've told you of negotiations we've suspended as a result of the Korean airline massacre, but we cannot, we must not, give up our effort to reduce the arsenals of destructive weapons threatening the world. Ambassador Nitze has returned to Geneva to resume the negotiations on intermediate-range nuclear weapons in Europe. Equally, we will continue to press for arms reductions in the START talks that resume in October. We are more determined than ever to reduce and, if possible, eliminate the threat hanging over mankind. We know it will be hard to make a nation that rules its own people through force to cease using force against the rest of the world, but we must try. This is not a role we sought. We preach no manifest destiny. But like Americans who began this country and brought forth this last best hope of mankind, history has asked much of the Americans of our own time. Much we have already given. Much more we must be prepared to give. Let us have faith in Abraham Lincoln's words, that right makes might, and in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it. If we do, if we stand together and move forward with courage, then history will record that some good did come from this monstrous wrong that we will carry with us and remember for the rest of our lives. Thank you. God bless you, and good.
That's a bit of a different tone, isn't it, Bruce? I just wanted to, I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a long clip, but there's such a difference in tone from president to president, comparing Reagan to Obama. It's not even fair.
It's not even a contest. In fact, I've literally got a lump in my throat and a tear in my eye. That was a leader. You just heard a leader. Kennedy had it, Eisenhower had it, Reagan definitely had it, and even Nixon had it. But at the time of 9/11, George W. Bush had shimmers of it. But I want to tell you something. That man Reagan meant what he said, and he said what he meant. And when he drew a line in the sand, whether it was the air traffic controllers going on strike, or whether it was going after Gaddafi in Libya, you could go to the bank. Listen, Brian, the Russians are very similar to the Muslims and the Arab streets. They they only understand, the Muslims and the Russians only understand one thing, and that's strength through power. And I think you're old enough to remember on the day of, you were a little boy, but on the day of Reagan's inauguration, Carter, him-hawed around, and he tried to rescue the hostages in an aborted attempt, and some of our Rangers were killed in Delta Force. Reagan comes in there, and on the day of the inauguration, Brian, Iran lets the hostages go because they feared Ronald Reagan. No one fears Barack Obama except the Tea Partiers in this country. If Barack Obama had half the hatred for Hamas and Hezbollah and the Muslim Brotherhood and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda that he has for the Republicans and the Libertarians and John Boehner and Rand Paul, he might get something accomplished.
Nobody fears this president except the Tea Partiers in his own country. Nobody in this world fears Barack Obama except the Tea Party supporters and the constitutionalists in the United States of America. Just let that sink in for a second. And that's, I wanted to get back to that point because you were talking about the ineptitude of Barack Obama not having the skill set. If we're talking Reagan being a former actor and Barack Obama being a hell of a teleprompter reader, they have that, but that's just the start. That's just that's just a skill set that helps you get through the rest.
Right.
I am trying to now approach my viewpoint on Barack Obama, not that he is inept, but that he is colluding to damage this country. That he's in on a plot to damage this country, or at least allow it to happen. Because if I'm wrong about him being incompetent and that he was just kind of a buffoon in over his head that really didn't understand how to do this job, all right, then I'll raise my hand after I have some historical perspective. But if I'm wrong about him being in on it, that's the end of this country. That's the end of this planet. And I think the risk-reward of being, wrong call. Boy, did I have that wrong. He's just totally incompetent. Look at that guy. If this man turns into something worse, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night not preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. If I had that backwards. If I was preparing for the best and, not really worrying about the danger plan, the extreme worst case scenario. I gotta say, if it comes to ineptitude or being in on it, there's a point where the number of air quote scandals reaches a mathematical impossibility that this is just random happenstance, and that he isn't working with Eric Holder to commit crimes, that he isn't working with Hillary Clinton to help the Muslim Brotherhood rise in northern Africa, to then go into Iraq that can kill our troops as we're not taking care of our troops. You just build up the laundry list and you go, my God, I really have to prepare myself for the fact that this president is only feared by people like me in this country, which makes me what? That's a weird spot to wake up and realize, Bruce.
It really is. Well, let me give you an example. And I was on the Ben Ferguson show here in Dallas, WBAP, with this line of thinking, and Ben agreed wholeheartedly with me on your collusion theory, Brian. Let me give you an example relative to this major immigration crisis we have going on in Texas right now. Memoranda has been produced. In fact, I just got from some of my sources as early as January of this year, but certainly April and May, that Obama not only knew these people were coming, he was meeting allegedly secretly with the presidents and prime ministers of these Central American nations, and probably the ACLU, Ben Ferguson says, to plan this. And then he has the audacity to come up here to Dallas and act like he didn't know this was going to happen. This caught him by surprise. The volume of kids and babies and young people and teenagers coming here as refugees from Central America, this just caught him by surprise. And if the Republicans don't hurry up and pass this $4.3 billion or $3.7 billion, whatever it is, then it's all Boehner's fault. Well, no, Mr. President, you not only knew it was going to happen, You invited them here in January and April and May. And you have to wonder, Brian, you're exactly right. Is the same type of collusion taking place with Putin and these Arabic nations that are anti-American and anti-Israel? Very good point.
It's a horrible point. It's the reason I do my show, and it's the reason I want to stop doing my show. You know, I'm putting a really big target on my back if any of this is true. And if it's not, so what? Then I was just a little overly cautious for everybody's freedom. Wow, what a bad guy I must be if I'm overly cautious so everybody can keep all of their freedom. That's just where I'm at. But it's why I do what I do, and it's why I hate doing what I do at the same time.
I know, I feel the same way, and Brian, I've been targeted. I'm one of those hated men in the history of Fort Worth, and I've been targeted across the country. I have some strong evidence that Obama, even though I'm a nobody, that his administration is watching me. But you know what? What happened to Patrick Henry, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, or George Washington in his bare feet at Valley Forge with snow 3 feet high? Somehow we, as your generation and my generation and your father's generation, we think we get a pass. Well, you know what? Your uncles and your grandfathers, that generation, they went up the cliffs at Normandy while those German snipers were shooting down on them. And why do we think we are excluded from some kind of martyrdom? And I'm not looking to be a martyr, by the way, but why are we not eligible for some sacrifice here? Ask not what your country can do for you, Kennedy said. Ask what you can do for your country. Robert Kennedy. Some men look at the way things are and say, why? I dream things that never were, and say, why not? And then he'd always say, by the way, you're going to pay for it. And you notice Reagan quoted two Democrats. I endorsed Scoop Jackson in the 76 primary before I switched to Carter. Scoop Jackson, Henry Jackson from Washington State, the senator, and John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman, these guys were hawks. These guys were pro-military. And Reagan alluded that in that great speech you played on the night of the Korean jetliner being blown up. Today, the Republicans don't have half the guts that the Democrats did back in the 60s and 70s. But the point is this, Brian. We are fighting for our children and our grandchildren, for your nieces and nephews, because I have never seen America in the condition she's in. Right now, $6,000 are being offered to people in California and Texas per kid, per student, if they will house some of these children. And many people are already quitting their jobs and saying, hey, if I take in 3 refugees from the Honduras, for instance, I can make $18,000 a month. Why should I go through the rigmarole of having a job and getting up at 6 in the morning and working from 8 to 5 or 8 to 4? I'll just take in a couple of these refugees. Well, who's going to pay for this $3.7 billion or $4.3 billion and these $6,000 per kid and the remodeling? Here in Dallas, we got to go in and do the plumbing in our schools. We got to look at all the facilities because we've got some liberal judge or councilman that wants to bring them all up here to Dallas, Fort Worth. I'll tell you who's going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it. I'm going to pay for it. And Obama's going to borrow the rest of the money from the red Chinese. We are a debtor nation, Brian. We are $17 trillion in debt. We can't even take care of our veterans. Our veterans are dying like flies, and we're going to invite 100,000 kids in here. The compassion part of me wants to help them. And I got to be honest with you. I think I can see where Glenn Beck is coming from, but on the other hand, I think he's lost his mind. We need to say no. My sources in the CIA and State Department after 9/11 told me that anywhere, one guy said 10, the other guy said 20, Al-Qaeda and Taliban are sneaking over the borders, and that's when they were well guarded after 9/11. Now the border guards are changing diapers. The borders are totally porous. And may I be very practical and very explicit, Brian? Sometimes, like the Hispanics in my church, 2 of my secretaries are Hispanic, and they said, Pastor, preacher, sometimes you can't tell a Middle Easterner from us Mexican Americans and us Mexicans. And they're brown-colored skin, they have tan skin, and if there were 5 to 10 to 20 sneaking across the borders when they were well guarded after 9/12, I dare say how many are sneaking across now? It's just a matter of time that we have another 9/11. And if Rand Paul is the president, everybody's going to blame Rand Paul and not this current guy in the White House. I'll tell you, Brian, it is so unbelievable that the the American public has lost their collective minds. But, you know, I applaud those ranchers and farmers and patriots and militia and law-abiding Christian cops that showed up, and you were there when Harry Reid wanted to ignite a confrontation and have those, I call them jackbooted thugs, fire on patriots that have owned that land for 120 years, so Harry Reid, the crook, can sell it to the Red Chinese for the oil. It's time that we stand up, Brian. I think we owe it to the patriots who've died and gone before and blazed the trail for us to say enough is enough. This is our country. And by the way, if we're so stinking bad, Brian, then why are all these people coming from Central America? They get here and they give us the proverbial finger. They milk our educational system. They milk our medical system. They and our health care. They milk everything, the welfare system, the entitlements, and at the same time they burn our flag. Well, you know, if you don't like this country, go back to where you came from.
Yeah, it's a lot of people look at it as winning the lottery. You know, now I get free stuff. Now I don't need to try. Like my quality of life has gone up exponentially just by being completely poor, living in wherever the government can put me. I don't know, just put me somewhere. And it's a nation of takers versus a nation of takers, of makers. I'm sorry. Jeez, I screwed that one up. Takers versus makers. And you know, there have been quite a few people that have quoted, made fairly stunning quotes about how I'm just gonna paraphrase because there's several of them that are gonna blur together. That our nation can really only remain a nation so long as, up until the point when we discover we can vote ourselves money. And it's kind of the lesson from Animal Farm, from George Orwell. Yeah. You know, at some point when the system is so exploited that it implodes on itself, and we're seeing it. I mean, look, the stock market, 17,000, really? Really? People are losing their full-time jobs. They're going on Medi-Cal. They're going on Medicaid. They're going on the WIC cards and the food stamps. They're going into public assistance. They're going for all of the handouts. They're losing their full-time jobs all across this country, but the stock market is soaring. I'll tell you what. You want a nice sucker punch in the middle of a global conflict? Hey, crash the stock market right about now. Pull the rug out from underneath everybody. Let's do 2008 again, except let's really let it crash this time. I'm telling you, I feel it in my gut that it's here. That everything that has been building and the pressure that has not been able to release, I feel like it's too tangible right now. It's too... I just can feel. I can feel it, Bruce. I feel like this is, once again, going back to it. This is why I'm going to try to prepare. Not that the president's incompetent, but that the Republicans and Democrats that have run this country for decades and decades and decades. I mean, the people behind the people with power, the puppet masters with the strings on the fingers. That this is part of the plan, and it's about time to light the fuse. I'm feeling it. I don't know where else to go with that, except, do you feel it exactly that same way, or you have enough perspective to realize that things have been bad before, they'll be bad again, and we usually pull through things like this?
That's an excellent question, and we've been meeting with people like Mike Huckabee and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz discussing these very issues at the Texas Renewal Project. Last year I was in Des Moines at the Iowa Renewal Project, and that's the question. Are we any worse off than Nazi Germany in the late 30s, early 40s, or as bad as it was under Jimmy Carter when, bless their hearts, the people in Youngstown and Warren, Ohio, the unemployment was 28%, you know, and if you had a Sears credit card or a Shell credit card, it was 35% interest. You know, has it been like this before? Well, that's a very good question, Brian, and I must say, the difference was, back in the day, when we went through the Vietnam War, when we went through Watergate, when we went through the 3 assassinations of JFK, RFK, and MLK, when we went through Watergate, when we went through Whitewater, when we went through Iran-Contra, when we went through two major, the Jimmy Carter Depression, when we went through all of that, America still had character. The family units were together. Divorce rate was about 20-30%. The churches all stuck together. Didn't matter if you were Presbyterian, Lutheran, Methodist, Episcopal, Baptist, Assembly of God, Nazarene, Church of God. Everybody stuck together. The closest allies I had in Youngstown when the mafia was chasing me was the Roman Catholics. They stood for me. My Methodist friends abandoned me. But people basically stuck together. Neighbors. You know, when I grew up in Cleveland, our neighbors didn't even lock the doors, Brian. And we had block parties. And when one neighbor died, whether it was in Parma, Ohio, or in Home, PA, where I went to junior high and high school, and everybody in the town was related to me, we didn't lock our doors. And if somebody died, everybody showed up at the funeral parlor. If there was a tragedy, we all took up a collection. And that America is gone. We have lost our character. And that's what I fear today. Not only are we $17 trillion in debt, but our people have this entitlement mentality, just like you said, this entitlement, give me, give me. I'm going to grab what I take. My name's Jimmy. I'll take all you give me. 52 to 54% of the American public is on the public dole or an entitlement or dependent upon a government payroll check. And you're right. Many historians and patriots have said for many years, for 200-plus years, when we ever get to the threshold of 40 to 50% of the American public being dependent on the federal government in Washington for their subsistence, we are in deep trouble. Well, it's over 50% now. And that's why Santa Claus won the last election. But I got to tell you, this guy, yes, he has agendas. He is a socialist. He is a far, far left-winger. He hates the Constitution. He wants to bring us from number 1 down to number 8. But by the same token, he's a puppet to George Soros, and he's a puppet to Warren Buffett, and everybody knows it. This guy is not controlling. Somebody is pulling this guy's strings because, and by the way, I'm sick and tired, Brian, of everybody saying, including the media, Chris Matthews, well, it's because he's black. It's because he's black. No, when Rick dropped out, I endorsed Herman Cain. Then Herman dropped out, and I endorsed Ron Paul. I endorsed a black man. So don't sit there and tell me that I cannot criticize a president because of his skin pigmentation. That is an insult to my intelligence. If that's the case, we better never elect another black president again. But the problem is not that he's black. The problem is that he's black and he's ultra-liberal. That's the problem. And the media is 100% for Obama. He could rape somebody on TV during a live news conference, and the media would still stick up for him.
You know, I'm actually pondering if I'm actually going into my brain right now, and I'm turning on the TV, and I'm watching the president rape somebody, and trying to imagine how the press would try to spin that. At what point, and I wrote this the other day. I didn't know. I was thinking about doing an entire project or an entire show about it, but I put this in writing, and it kind of jumps right into the spot that we have right now in the show. I said at some point I had to throw up my arms about George Bush. The Patriot Act, Iraq, 9/11 and the financial crash. When will you oppose Barack Obama? Because I've seen enough to realize something's wrong. And I'm just wondering, when the people that voted for him, when is that tipping point? Because you have seen his poll numbers dropping. They're not as low as they should be by any stretch. He should have been impeached several NSA leaks ago. Thank you, Mr. Snowden. But his poll numbers are going down. Do you think the country is waking up to it? Enough of them.
Yes, they are. There are many African Americans and blacks here in South Texas because of the border crisis, and out in California where you're at, standing in front of the buses, many blacks and Hispanics. In Chicago, where we just had 10 more murders over the Independence Day weekend, where 2 of my children live, and my son-in-law lives in Chicagoland. I heard a black lady day before yesterday being interviewed on Fox News, and she said, I voted for Obama twice, but he is the worst president we have ever had. Instead of sending all this money to Honduras and El Salvador, why doesn't he help the poor people here in Chicago? I heard a black lady in Detroit saying, I thought he was going to buy me a phone and pay for my gasoline bill. He's done nothing for me. And he's been a bad president. And the blacks in Houston and Galveston are starting to turn.
Here's the one I have. Here, let me jump in. Here's the one I have from Houston.
Officials with the Department of Homeland Security toured the old Carroll Middle School, considering it to possibly be a holding location for an unknown number of illegal immigrant children.
Unknown number.
No decision has been made yet for this location, but one resident who said her kids have gone without nothing, have had nothing for years, she says she is furious.
It's not right. Now billions of dollars want to be borrowed from the White House to help feed and house them. Where the kids here in our country? Not just in this neighborhood, but in our country. All these kids, really? Why can't they go back? I'm sorry that the parents are in poor living conditions or surroundings or whatever's going on out there. I don't care. I care about what's going on right here in my own backyard, my neighborhood. Am I the only one in this community that's out here that watches the news this morning? Oh, my God. I feel alone right now in this, and I'm very saddened by it.
She says she feels alone by this. She's not alone at all.
No, she's not. And there are thousands of blacks and African Americans and Hispanics that are here in Dallas-Fort Worth that I've been talking to and across the country that reverberate or echo what that lady was saying. And I did hear that on the Chris Crock show the other night. You're right, here in Dallas. And I'm hearing the same sentiment out of Chicago, where there is so much crime on the street and people are starving to death. Our veterans are dying with heart attacks and strokes because they cannot get medical treatment. Veterans from World War II and Korea and Vietnam who put their lives, and Guyana and Desert Storm 1, who put their lives on the line. The veterans are asked to be, I have two veteran friends, one in my church who's a U.S. Marine and a highly decorated war hero from this war, and a Vietnam veteran friend of mine from Michigan in the U.S. Navy. They both got letters saying you now have to surrender your weapons. No veteran who ever received treatment from a VA hospital is allowed to have any hunting rifles because we fear what you might do. I mean, it's crazy what's going on out there. If anybody should be allowed to possess a firearm, it's a former U.S. veteran, male or female, Navy, Coast Guard, Army, National Guard, Marines, it doesn't matter. I'm telling you, Brian, I'm telling you, people are waking up. Will he be impeached? No, because he's liberal, he's a Democrat, and he's black, okay? He will not be impeached. Should John Boehner sue him? No, that's ridiculous. You know, only the Republicans can snatch defeat from victory.
Well,
they're going to win this.
That in Cleveland
they're
sports.
They're going to win this congressional by a landslide unless Boehner messes it up.
Well, that's what they're saying, though, is that the impeachment right now might fire up the uneducated voter, the Obama zombie that would come out to support. Well, you can't allow him to get impeached, or else, it's clearly it's all about what they're telling me. That's the only way that the Republicans could lose the Senate. So they should only do that after the election, after they get shellacked. I mean, do you agree with that as far as impeachment? It'll never happen.
Here's the problem. There is an element of truth to that. Now, you got to understand something. I'm a clergyman and a pastor and a minister and a patriot and a constitutionalist and a conservative first and a politician a distant third, fourth, or fifth, okay? So I don't have to play the political game. I try to live by principle. That's why I'm totally against abortion. I know you and I differ on that a little bit, but to me that's a core principle that I cannot compromise any more than a good Catholic priest can compromise it. So I say impeach the guy now, but the reality and the acumen and the political reality is, Brian, he's not going to get impeached, and Boehner's not going to lose his lawsuit, win his lawsuit, and it is going to bring out Obama's base, and there is a chance that they could snatch a victory out of the jaws of defeat. But I don't think so. I don't think. To be honest with you, Brian, I think the tea leaves are there. The writing, like from the book of Daniel, the writing is on the wall, And I think this is going to be one of the biggest shellackings that the presidential party has had in a midterm election. I think it's going to be monumental, and I think you're going to be surprised. It's going to be worse than '94 when the entire Democratic Congress was swept out under Denny Hastert. I think it's going to be bigger, and Newt Gingrich. I think it's going to be bigger than the Republican Revolution that the Clintons ignited. I think everybody's getting fed up. You're right, Brian. Everybody's out of work. I talked to a lawyer that just lost his job. He was with a corporate firm in Dallas for 17 years. My barber's wife just got laid off from Sears. She'd been there 19 years. She just got laid off permanently. Everybody's getting there. And this is in Dallas-Fort Worth, where we have the best economy. And thanks to Governor Perry, we have a $30 million surplus in the state. And people are losing their jobs here in Dallas-Fort Worth. I mean, what would it be like in Cleveland or Philadelphia or Detroit, for crying out loud, or Gary, Indiana? You know what I'm saying? And it's bad, man. It's bad. And this president is too busy he's on his 123rd vacation he's going into, and he can't even come to the White House during a major military crisis with this airplane. And by the way, a little humor, Brian. We got to be a little bit like Dennis Miller sometimes, right? Who is going to fly on the Malaysian airplane? Are you nuts? I mean, come on, they disappear, they vanish in midair, and then they get shut out by the Ruskies. So what was that pilot doing in a combat zone anyway? I mean, you'd have to be totally nuts to fly on a Malaysian. One guy took his picture, some Swiss guy, or a Danish guy, and or a Dutch guy, and he took his picture and said, if this plane disappears like the other one, I want my relatives to have a picture of the airplane and me waving goodbye. Well, bless his heart, that's exactly what happened. But, I mean, you'd have to be a complete dimwit to fly on Malaysian Airlines. I'd rather fly on the Hooterville Pixley Airlines with Oliver Wendell Douglas.
There was so somebody took that picture making the joke. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, one of the passengers, one of the ill-fated passengers, made a joke. Bless his heart, he didn't survive it, And there was one American on board, and many Filipinos, many doctors that were going to Malaysia to try to find a cure for AIDS down there. So we lost some of our best and brightest from Holland and Scandinavia. And it's not a little tragedy like Obama is trying to make it sound like a little traffic accident. This was an act of war. It was an act of terrorism, and he needs to be in the White House. We have two extremes. Jimmy Carter never left the White House during the Iranian hostage crisis. That was the other extreme. And then we have this guy, the world's blowing up, and he's playing golf, he's playing billiards here in Dallas, he's going to barbecues, he's not canceling any fundraisers, and now he's fixing to go on another vacation. Where is CBS? Hey, come on, CBS, you're listening to this. ABC, you're watching this. NBC, come on, act like a real journalist. You guys ought to turn in your diplomas to your school of journalism, whether it's Columbia or Harvard or wherever it is, and you ought to go and ask forgiveness on the grave of Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite for being a complete shill to the Democratic Party and to the Obama administration. Shame on you, journalists and reporters.
And that brings me to another topic that I want to get into, which is the situation in Gaza. I have, for my entire life, since I can remember paying attention to anything, it's always been fighting in the Middle East. Always. Can you give us the dummy's guide to understanding what's happening there? Because what I'm hearing now, almost nonstop from most of the sources that I'm hearing, is pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli comments ranging a wide spectrum of reasons. But I thought it was something different than it might be, or I'm taking in the propaganda from one side. And I want to get your take on it, because I don't have all of the information on this conflict. A lot of people think they do, but they don't. You've been there. You've studied this stuff. Can you lay it out in the way, the truth as you see it, so that we can try to understand and put in perspective what we're seeing today with the ground offensive that just launched from Israel?
Yes, excellent question, Brian. Let me, and I have been there. I've been on the West Bank. I've been to Palestine. I've been to Israel. Been to Jerusalem. Been to Tel Aviv. I've been to Hebron. Let me back up and go retrospectively. In other words, let me go in reverse.
Yeah,
kind of back to the future. Let me go chronologically from now backwards. First of all, Dr. Charles Krauthammer, who is a medical doctor and a psychiatrist and a brilliant mind. I don't always agree with Chuck, but he's pretty sharp. He said today, and I agree with him, that they are using these teenagers, I guess there were 4 kids killed on a beach, they are using them as human shields. Hamas has always done that. And many of the militant Islamic groups will use their own people as human shields. The Israelis for a week and a half have been saying, get out of these areas. We are not trying to kill civilians. Now, does Hamas say that when they launch their mortars and rockets into Tel Aviv and Jerusalem? Heavens no. But Israel is a democracy. They're a democratic republic like the United States. They try to take a higher road. They try to live by the Geneva Convention and the laws of international rule. And so they've been sending leaflets and flyers and broadcasting, get out of these areas. But Hamas uses their own children as human shields. To answer your question about the media reaction, ABC needs to apologize to Benjamin Netanyahu, as does that idiot Wolf Blitzer on CNN, because their coverage is totally lopsided toward the Palestinians. When I was standing on the banks of the Kidron Valley looking down at the eastern gate of the old temple, and by the way, that's where Jesus will come in. He went through there on Palm Sunday, and the doors were shut, and they haven't been opened since. And when Christ returns, Brian, in the rapture, as you well know, he's going to come through that eastern gate as the Messiah and the conquering king this time. He will be the military leader this time. But I'm standing there with David Sloan from Russia, and David said, what you got to understand, Bruce, is that the PLO and Hamas are the darlings. The Palestinians are the darlings of the American media. The American media, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, ABC, and PBS, the Palestinians can do no wrong. When they blow up a dance hall or a pizza parlor and 40 Israeli kids are killed, it's no big deal. They deserved it. Lopsided policy. If a school bus gets blown up and 20 students lose their lives, well, that's not as bad as the one kid that got killed over on the West Bank. First of all, Israel is at war. Would the mayor of Los Angeles stand by, or the mayor of Cleveland, Ohio stand by, or the governors of those states, or even the president, if 400 missiles or rockets or mortar shells were launched into their neighborhoods? No, they would take immediate action. I cannot believe the patience and resolve of Israel, which, by the way, is the only ally we have in the Middle East. Hello, Saudi Arabia. And so they've been patient. They've warned these people. Hamas continues to use their own flesh and blood as human shields, which is against the Geneva Convention, against international law. Now, with all that said, what about the 3 teenagers that were killed, including an American citizen? The media in America has forgotten about them. Oh, they're feeling sorry for these poor kids that were killed on the beach. Well, I hate to tell the American media, but war is heck. War is pure hell. And people are going to die. And civilians are going to, unfortunately, die. This is war. And Hamas started this thing, and bless God, unlike America, Israel's not going to put up with it, and they're going to finish it. Now, where does this all go back to? People say 400 years. That's not correct, Brian. This war between the Israelis, the Jews, and the Hebrews versus the Palestinians, who are descendants of the Philistines. Remember David and Goliath, the giant of the Philistines?
Yeah.
The Philistines and the Arabs and the Muslims and the North Africans. This thing has been going on for 6,000 years, and it all started when Abraham had sex with the maid of the family. And Hagar was a handmaid and an assistant to his wife Sarah. And Abraham was a very wealthy man. He was royalty. And to this day, they say he's the father of the Hebrew nation. And they wanted a baby, and they were getting up in years, and they could not wait for God's will. So Sarah goes, "Hey, Abe, why don't you go into the tent and have some relations with Hagar, and we'll produce a child." But as soon as that happened and Hagar gets pregnant, then Sarah turns to hate. Her love for Hagar and her idea herself turns to self-hatred and hatred against Hagar. So they banish Hagar, and Ishmael is born, and he is the father of the Arab nation. And the Bible says in every religion that he will be like a wild man. In other words, the Bible predicted thousands of years ago, and the King James Bible 400 years ago, that the Arabs and the Muslims would be a wild man, quote unquote. They would be terrorists. They've lived up to Ishmael's legacy. And then later on down the road, they have their own son, and he is born, and Isaac is born, and even though Sarah was well up in years. So this conflict, every time we pay $5 for a gallon of gasoline, or a jet airplane is shot out of the air, or the Muslims launch some missiles into Tel Aviv, it all goes back to the illicit affair that Abraham had with Hagar.
Now, some people will say that the human shield component is because Hamas and the Palestinians, because they're not being funded by the U.S. Congress. That they're not being funded, so they have no other option. Of course, they have to appeal to humanitarian issues and using human shields, because they cannot fight a conventional war. They literally have knives, and Israel has nuclear weapons. Okay, and I've heard people say, well, they're just tossing like the equivalent of bottle rockets. I think one person in Israel was killed by the equivalent of maybe 1,200 bottle rockets. One person got killed, and we're up to thousands injured, buildings destroyed, kids being blown apart in front of their families because Israel is using uneven force. So how do you reply to that one, that they're only using human shields and fighting that way because they're not being funded by the U.S. like Israel is, and that the force Israel is using is the equivalent to walking in the mall, bumping into somebody, and then they cut your head off because of it?
That has been the exact mantra of these networks during this war, this crisis. Well, you know, their mortars aren't quite as sophisticated as the Israeli mortars because they're financed by the United States, and their rockets aren't as accurate as the Israeli rockets, and they're not quite as powerful. The missiles aren't quite as powerful as the Israeli missiles. And so what are we supposed to do? Is this like a handicap in golf? Are we supposed to give them some mulligans? I mean, what is this? Just because Israel has superior military hardware, that gives a license to the leaders of Hamas to put their little children and teenagers out there as a human shield? What is that? Well, they only have knives and sabers and swords, and the Israelis have M16s. Well, first of all, that's a bunch of hooey. I don't buy that template, Brian. That's again, the American media. Always remember, the Palestinians are the darling of the American media. I'll never forget Dr. David Sloan telling me that. Dr. Jim Vineyard told me the same thing, and he works with the Israeli military on a weekly basis. Don't ever forget that the Palestinians are the darling of the American left media establishment. The mainstream media, you don't like to call them that anymore. Rush calls them the drive-by, whatever you want to call them. Okay?
Dinosaur.
They can do. And by the way, there were no Palestinians until 1964 when the United Nations made this imaginary country called Palestine. Palestine was Israel before 1947. It was Jerusalem and Hebron and Nazareth and Bethlehem before 1947-48 when they became a state again. There are no Palestinians. There is no nation called Palestine.
Well,
they've given up Bethlehem, they've given up this town and that town, and the more property Israel gives up, the more rockets are launched and the more people get kidnapped.
And that's what people say, too. They'll say, well, Israel's not really a country. It was just carved out, completely arbitrarily carved out in 1947. They don't deserve to be there. That's not their land. They stole it. How do you reply to that?
Well, then they don't know their Bible, because Israel is 6,000 years old. And while they were the subjects of Rome during the Roman Empire when Christ was born, and yes, some of them went into Babylonian captivity under Nebuchadnezzar, which is now Iraq, that has been the land of the Jews for 6,000 plus years, And I will take the Bible and 20 different religions over a 1964 decision by the United Nations.
Well, it's not just the left-wing media saying it. It's not just the dinosaur media, the corporate bought and sold, bought and paid for propaganda networks. It's also quite a few figures in alternative media. I'm seeing more and more of it from people that I generally tend to, okay, all right, 80, 90% success rate. I'm usually on point with what these people are talking about. And a lot of them are siding on the Palestinians as well. So
well, there is a major rise of anti-Semitism in this country and in Europe, and I am really starting to fear another Holocaust. We're opening up all these Holocaust museums, and yet our leaders in both the Republican and Democratic parties are siding with the Muslims. Obama always sides with the Muslims over Israel, and that's a good point. But it doesn't change the reality. It doesn't change the geopolitics. It doesn't change the fact that Christ, okay, this is going to make your audience mad, but may I remind them, Christ was a Jew, and he is also the second highest prophet in Islam. Hello. And let me remind you that King Solomon built the temple in Israel, in Jerusalem. He was a Jew. And his dad, King David, defeated the Philistines. He was a Jew. Okay? And Great Britain backed out at the last minute because they became cowardly when they kicked Churchill out. But in 1938-39, they sent Ord Wingate, their #1 Israeli British commando over there to start setting up Israel. And C.I. Schofield predicted in 1909 that Israel would have to become a nation again before Christ could come back. And they said he was crazy. He died a few years later. Dr. C.I. Schofield and the Schofield Bible did not live to see his prophecy fulfilled, but it was in 47, 48. President Harry Truman, who was a good old Baptist, King James Tilton Baptist, he said, France is backing out, even England is backing out. The fledgling UN, they're not going to support us anymore. The old League of Nations, they're a dinosaur. If I'm the last man standing, Harry Truman said, I am with the Jews and I want to stick by the Jews. And Harry S. Truman, a Democrat, stood by himself practically to make sure that Israel would get their statehood in 1948. Thank God for President Truman. By the way, where is the Democratic Party? When Nixon was in Watergate, we had Howard Baker, a Republican, and we had Lowell Weicker, a Republican, coming out. These Democrats, they're 100%, all of them, well, I will say this. Dianne Feinstein spoke out against Obama when he traded a deserter for 4 generals, which is like trading Sergeant Schultz for Eisenhower, Patton, Marshall, and Bradley in World War II. But getting back to your point, the Jews and the Israelis are our only ally in the Middle East. They have a democracy. They stand for America, and I don't buy this lopsided policy business. I don't buy the fact that and you're right. I went to a symposium on the day of the Kennedy assassination anniversary, and there was a lecturer blaming the Jews for the Kennedy assassination, for crying out loud.
And they're blamed for 9/11 too.
They're blamed for 9/11. They're blamed for the JFK assassination now. And you go all the way back to Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice. The Jews have always been blamed for every bad thing in the world, when in reality it was Jonas Salk, a Jew, who found a cure to polio. It was half of these German Jew doctors and rocket scientists that invented this and invented that. And they gave us the law that we use today. Our Constitution, both from Great Britain and America, was based on the Israeli code of the Old Testament. They gave us government. They gave us democracy. They gave us modern medicine. And yet the American media and the Republican and Democratic parties of this nation, the Jews are the easy paper tiger to kick around. The Jews, it's I'll tell you, Brian, I'm telling you, I studied Hitler extensively at Westminster College. I took a whole course off of old Dr. Harry Swanhart, an intensive course. We watched old newsreels, and I'm seeing the same anti-Semitism and the same blame game that Chancellor Adolf Hitler used to use the Jews as a scapegoat to launch World War II, which resulted in the death of 6 million Jews at his hands and 12 million at the hands of Stalin. I'm seeing the same sentiment in our media, both political parties, Congress and especially the White House. And I'm quite frankly, I'm getting sick of it. I stand with the Jews. When I was over there, I offered to go to the front lines and fight with them. But thank God war didn't break out that week. And you know what? They were going to give me an F-16. Yeah, I'll go and die for Israel on the front lines, or America on the front lines here in the last days, like David of old. I'll put my life. Listen, I am for the Jews. Call me a Jew lover. Call me whatever you want. Actually, I'm German. You know, you and I are German. If anybody should have an indictment against the Jews, it's you and me. I'm pro-Israel. I'm pro-Jewish, and bless God, they are God's chosen nation. That's going to make everybody mad, but it's the truth.
You know, there was I sent something out on our Facebook and our Twitter feed this week. Comedian Jon Stewart, who does The Daily Show on Comedy Central, he was on a vacation for, I don't know, a stretch of time. He comes back after the World Cup was won by Germany, and after, of course, what happened in the sports world last week. And Jon Stewart says, you know, I don't get it. I go on vacation for a little while, come back, and the world is so out of control right now that the two happiest places on earth are Germany and Cleveland. You know, well, you don't think happy when you think of Germans, and you don't think of happy when you think of Cleveland. You just don't. And I thought it just kind of summed it up really nicely. I think it's hilarious.
I'm not a big Jon Stewart fan, but that is a funny line. That's a good line. And by the way, congratulations, both of us former fellow Clevelanders. We got LeBron James back, who, by the way, is Jewish. You didn't know that, did you? King James.
I see what you did there. Bum.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll be here all night.
We got LeBron James. We got LeBron James back. You got the RNC over Dallas. The two finalists were Dallas-Fort Worth versus Cleveland. You got the RNC, which is going to bring a lot of commerce and business and notoriety to Cleveland. You've got 4 first-round draft choices and a German coach for the Cavaliers.
David Blatt.
The Indians are one of 2 of the hottest teams in the American League. And you got Johnny Football at the Browns. It's